J.T. Crowley is Talking Books. On the show, you'll hear from emerging talent and seasoned veterans from around the world.
Hello everyone, I'm J.T. Crowley. I'm the host of Talking Book Show on Web Talk Radio, and today I welcome back for the second time Jane McCabe from Los Angeles in California. Now, the last time she came on the show, we talked about one of her books, which was an adult book. It was a religious book. But we're not going to do that book. She actually wrote some children's books. So this is a podcast interview about the children's books that she wrote, she illustrated, and one of the books, which she didn't write, but she edited it and illustrated it. So we're going to be talking about 4 books here, everybody. And how we're going to do this interview is that Jane and I will read part of these stories, and then Jane will talk you through her wonderful, amazing, bright, vivid illustrations. So as you get to see what the illustrations look like, because these are children's books and the illustrations are just as important, and they are very, very good. And as when she comes on the show, you'll see behind her some of the paintings that she's done. So she's an artist, she's a painter. So these illustrations are good, everybody, believe you me. So we're going to have the 4 books. And the first book we will have is the remarkable story of the very first flower. Then we're going to have the little blue lamb. Then we're going to go to the worm who wanted to fly. Now, we've got a little bit of a discussion here because, yes, the book says worm, but it's actually a caterpillar. And Jane likes to say caterpillar, but it is a worm. So we have, we'll let you decide. And then the last book we will go to is Celeste Oliver, that book, and The Holy Wall. Oh boy, there is a hole in that wall. But there you go. So anyway, Jane, it's so good to see you again. You're looking fabulous. Would you care to come and join me on the show and tell us, again, just remind us who you are and why you've written these children's books?
Well, it was always a personal goal of mine to write children's books because I love children's books. And when I was young, there was a, 10, 15-year period of time when I worked principally with children. Had a wonderful job in San Francisco with the Unified School District at the children's centers. And I would go to the library and pick out books and then come back and read them to the children. So I got a real sense of what they liked. Now, this particular book, The Remarkable Story of the Very First Flower, has an inspiration. So the first thing I'm going to show you is this little paperback, and it's called The Immense Journey. And it was written by a naturalist by the name of Lauren Isley. At that period of time, because this is in the, long time ago in the 1970s, I read this book and I was very intrigued because, see, this is a book for adults, but he has a chapter in it called How Flowers Changed the World. Now, basically what this is, and it's really very remarkable, I love this, before flowering plants came to the world, they did have plants, but they were plants that reproduced by what they call sporing. And those plants maybe produced some food for dinosaurs, but they didn't produce enough food to feed the emerging mammals. So it was I'm going to be a little technical, it was at the Cretaceous period of time, about 1 million years ago, when flowers magically, really, because there was no precedent, flowers magically started coming to the world. You say, well, why flowers? Well, it's because flowering plants are the very plants that produce fruit. And the fruit of flowering plants contains seeds. And those seeds can be eaten as is, or they fall into the ground and produce more plants. So this was a huge natural revolution. And when I read this and I was working with children, I thought, why not tell the story of the very first flower for children? So I did. Here is the remarkable story of the very first flower. I had a summer free when I was living in the desert, and I was able to it's a lot of work to illustrate a book, believe me, but I had the time, so I was able to do it. I'm just going to read you a few words from the first pages, and then I'm going to jump to page 10. And my reason to jump there is because let me go back to the cover, of the characters in the book. We have the giant plants. We have the tiny, tiny little flower. We have a dinosaur, and children love dinosaurs. And we have a little mouse, because he represents the mammals coming and supplanting the dinosaurs. So it starts out a long, long time ago. I'm going to have to read and then show you the pictures. There were no flowers on earth, nor were there people here. Then the world was a world of giants, giant plants, and giant animals called dinosaurs. The dinosaurs ruled this sleepy world of long ago with loud roars and heavy steps. Now, rather than continue here, so what happens is this little flower springs up, and the giant plants are very startled by the appearance of this little flower. A tiny pink bud, the very first flower on earth. Can you imagine what that must have been like? So the giant plants were astonished. They were frightened, and they talked among themselves in excited whispers. After a while, they announced, "Little plant, we think something's the matter with you. You have such a funny looking growth." When Little Plant heard this, she felt ashamed. She believed what the giant plant said and tried to hide her flower. But I've got to read it. But the more she tried to hide it, the bigger and the more beautiful it became. But Little Flower didn't think so. She began to cry. Just then a rumble shook the ground. It was the footsteps of a dinosaur looking for something to eat. "Hey," roared the dinosaur. "You're different. What are you?" Little Plant quivered. She meant to say, "I'm a failure," but what came out was, "I'm a flower." "What's a flower for?" said the dinosaur. "I was wondering that myself," said Little Plant. Okay, that's enough. Actually, at the end, after the seeds grow, the flower has a berry, and the seeds open up and fall into the ground. At the end, each seed sprouts a new plant. So the flower revolution, which started with one tiny little flower, was underway. Only one more thing I want to say is, you could not have been born if it weren't for flowers. Because flowers gave the world the food it needed so mammals could develop, and then human beings, and then us. So that's the remarkable story, or something about the remarkable story of the very first flower.
You know, when I looked at the illustrations, Jane, they're fabulous. They're bright, they're colourful. And of course, the little flower all on her own, she loses her petals and she starts to wither, but then she bears the fruit, and then all the other seeds come along, and she's no longer, there she is. She's no longer on her own, and she's happy. There's more and more flowers. So it's a great bedtime read, everybody. For parents or grandparents or anybody to sit down with a young child and for a bedtime read. It's fabulous.
Thank you. I've had enough people have read this story to children, and the response is that children love it. So that's always heartening to hear that.
It is. Now, so that's the first of the books that we said we're going to cover off. Now, I want to go to The Little Blue Lamb. Now, this was written by Wayne F. Maxwell, so you didn't write it, but you edited it and you did the illustrations. So would you care to give us a read and take us through some of the illustrations you did?
Yes, I'd like to do that. Just to mention, Wayne was a actor, director, playwright. He was a very dear fellow. He's been gone at least 25 years by now, and he wrote for children. He, like many amateur writers, the thing amateur writers tend to do is they overwrite. So his work was full of phrases that were extraneous and just bogged down the text. And so what I had to do in editing is to strip it out so that the text could glow. So, but I loved the story, and I was granted the opportunity to illustrate it, which was great fun for me. So we'll start with this. Okay, The Little Blue Lamb. Heather was a lamb. Now, there's nothing wrong with being a lamb. In fact, in some circles, it's regarded as rather special. Heather never thought of herself as special. The only thing she ever thought was why she happened to be blue. Most lambs, of course, are white. There are a few that are black. Some are gray, and some are even spotted. But I ask you, have you or any member of your family ever seen a little blue lamb? Heather couldn't help the fact she was blue. She just happened to be born that way. She asked her mother again and again, "Why am I the only blue lamb in our desert?" Her mother said she had searched her soul and couldn't find an answer. Heather would just have to trust that God must have a reason for making her blue. Okay, I'm going to jump here. Now, what Heather does is she kind of wanders around in the desert. And as she's wandering around in the desert, one day, as she was cooling herself in the shade of a date palm, she saw in the distance some figures moving slowly through the heat and dust. You probably can't see it, but over on this side of the page, and they're far away, are some figures coming towards where Heather is. And it turns out that these figures are Mary and Joseph on their way to Bethlehem. And you probably know that it was in Bethlehem that Jesus was born. So Mary's on a donkey and Joseph is leading. And they stop at the oasis, and Joseph gives the little blue lamb a drink of cool water, and Mary rocks her, and then they go on their way. Shortly after that, Heather falls asleep, and she has kind of a dream, but when she wakes up, when she hears a voice with the power of thunder saying, "I will show you what love is." And after that, she's surrounded by all kinds of different animals. Now we come to my favorite. Oh, and then the angel comes and tells them to follow the star and see where it leads them. This is my favorite illustration of all of them. So all of these animals, I don't know how well you can see, all of these animals make their way to the stable where Jesus is born. Now, Heather is the very first one in the line. And so she comes and she looks in the stable and she sees Mary and Joseph and the baby. She goes up to the crib, the manger, and Mary picks her up and the baby Jesus touches the little blue lamb. Okay. So when that happens, the little blue lamb knows that that blue is a fine color for a lamb. And that's the story. Anyway, it was great fun illustrating this book. And, you always see places where you would like to make changes, but, mostly I'm pretty happy with this.
It reminds me, Jane, because you were a teacher. And when you were saying that you were editing, I was thinking, oh, perhaps this is teacher marking the story.
Well, I go into my teacher voice and everything when I read these stories. Yeah.
She got the red pen out, everybody.
Yeah. I don't think there's ever been anything that I've created that I didn't see something in it that I thought was a little off. And then I'm always reminded of what the Muslims say. They treasure the mistakes in artwork because they say only Allah is perfect.
Yes. But, when I looked at the illustrations, they are so cleverly put together and they really do add to the story. They support it very well. And as I said, this is, it's a Christmas one, but it's a great read, a great bedtime read, just like the remarkable story of the very first flower. These are all, great stories for kids to either read on their own, with age ranges, 5, 6, 7, 8, some or less, and for parents and grandparents to read them to their children or grandchildren.
The remarkable story of the first flower and the little blue lamb, I would say the age is sort of like, 4 or 5, 3 if the child's terribly precocious, maybe to 6 or 7. Actually, the story of the first flower, it's a fairly sophisticated story under it. And, but I think children get it,
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
They'll get that easily.
Yeah.
Don't underestimate a child.
No.
Their imagination is just amazing. So, the worm who wanted to fly. What I want to do is fly, said Worm. How can you fly when you have no wings, said Bird. Only things with wings can fly. You're right, said Worm. Only things with wings can fly. And he went to work to make himself a pair of wings. He gathered leaves, string and wire, and after much huffing, puffing and grunting, he fashioned himself a pair of wings. He stood at the edge of a branch and said, well, here goes, 1, 2, 3. But nothing happened. Worm was too scared to jump. It was just as well. He would have met with a terrible fall if he had. But what I want to do is fly, said Worm. Wings are things you either have or you don't, said Bird. A worm is a worm is a worm. And off he flew into the bright blue sky. Worm watched and imagined how wonderful it would be to have wings and fly. He looked at his fat green body. He had nothing which resembled wings. If I can't fly, he told the world, I'm saying goodbye. And he spun himself into a cocoon to die. Inside the cocoon, it was very dark. Am I dead? Wondered Worm. But he could still hear the sounds of the world, birds, airplanes, the wind. Darn, said Worm. If they can fly, why can't I? And since he wasn't dead, he went to work. Slowly, slowly, after many days of huffing, puffing and grunting, his fat green body shrank, and from his sides grew two mysterious things. And one day, when he was ready, he ate his way out of his cocoon, and pop! The two mysterious things were two beautiful wings, yellow, orange, and brown. He stood on the edge of a branch and said to Bird, Hi, remember me? I'm Worm. A worm is a worm, remarked Bird. And off he flew into the bright blue sky. Well, here goes, said Worm. 1, 2, 3. And off he flew into the bright blue sky. What a wonderful little story, everybody.
You read it so beautifully.
Would you like to show us the illustrations so people actually see what I was reading?
Okay.
Talk us through the illustrations.
This is the cover. I don't know, up a little higher?
That's perfect.
Okay. Now, here we go. It was fun. This was pure inspiration. I think I did this whole book in about 2 hours, which is not my, but anyway, it just kind of came to me. I was living in Montana and I saw a green caterpillar and I said, oh, and I was able to draw him. So that's why the caterpillar looks fairly, here's the caterpillar saying, what I want to do is fly. And the bird is quite fun because the bird is, how can you fly when you have no wings? Only things with wings can fly. This is. Okay. Anyway, so here he is trying to making his worm. And let's go, I'm going to move a little further here. And here we are. Here's the bird again. Wings are things you either have or you don't, said Bird. A worm is a worm is worm. Some of you might recognize that from Gertrude Stein's comment, a rose is a rose is a rose. Kind of. Okay, so here he is looking at his fat green body and going into his cocoon where it's dark. And here he is when pop, he eats his way out, and the two things are wings. So here he is standing at the edge of the branch where he says, I remember me, I'm Worm. And of course, the bird doesn't recognize him. A worm is a worm is a worm's, remarked Bird. And off he flew. And the story ends with, and off Worm flew into the bright blue sky.
Even upside down, everyone.
Oh, no, I'm so sorry. There we go. I thought, okay, there we go. This story, it's always been kind of close to my heart because it was really, the whole thing was pure inspiration. And it just kind of came to me, and it was so fun to do the pictures. So that's the caterpillar that wants to fly.
Yeah, and now the other book we're going to do, everybody, is Celeste Oliver and the Holy War. So I'm going to read a little bit of it, and I'm going to let Jane talk to you about how the story came about and where this came from. But here we go. So this is Celeste Oliver and the Holy War. Once upon a time, there was a princess named Celeste, and a prince named Oliver, who were friends. Celeste's mother and father were the king and queen of Moravia, and Oliver's were the king and queen of the adjacent kingdom of Symposia. Between the two kingdoms, there were an apple orchard and a brick wall stretching north to south. Moravia was to the east of the wall and Symposia to the west. It had been built when the two kingdoms were hostile. But they had been friendly for so long that it had fallen into a state of dilapidation and had holes in it. Celeste and Oliver would often play in the orchard on one side of the wall or the other, climbing the apple trees, picking apples, and sometimes eating so many of them that they got stomach aches and had to be given castor oil. Now, Celeste was a polite princess because her parents had taught her good manners and certain virtues, such as honesty, kindness to plants and animals, and sharing her possessions with others. She had a loving heart, and she loved Oliver, despite the fact that his parents had not taught him these things, so he had a tendency to be rude, cruel to plants and animals, and he did not like sharing his possessions with others at all. Though Celeste was quite pretty, Oliver liked to tease her and call her ugly. Or he might knock over the basket of apples she was planning to take home, so that the royal cook of Moravia might bake for the royal family an apple pie with cinnamon, which they would eat with large dollops of vanilla ice cream. Sometimes Oliver even threw apples at Celeste. So that's just a little snapshot of these two characters that make up this book, Celeste, Oliver. And when you look at the book, there's a hole in the wall. So we've got the nice princess and we've got not quite the nice prince. And what she does was she decides, no, I've had enough of him. I'm going to brick up that hole so as he can't come through. But Oliver doesn't quite accept that. And he finds a way round it. Nothing to do with the lead elephant by any chance? Oh, it could be. So it's a wonderful story. But I just want to ask you, Jane, where's the backdrop? What was the background to this story? Where did this come from in your wildest imaginations?
Oh my gosh, it came from a very sad event in my life when I had a relationship that went sour. And in writing this story, it was part of the healing process. When I lived in the desert, I was both able to illustrate the story of the first flower, which took hours. And I also wrote this Celeste, Oliver, and the Holy Wall. I've never had I think it's kind of a good story, but my sister, who would make a great editor, she was critical of some of my language or something. And I guess it made me think that the story wasn't as good as I hoped it would be. But when I hear you read it, John, I think, hey, that's pretty good.
Oh, I'm a very good narrator.
Yes, you are.
Very good narrator. And when I look at the illustrations, they're wonderful. Again, you've got Oliver trying to climb over the wall and Celeste hiding. And then you've got the elephants. And Oliver's on the back of the lead elephant and waving his blue cap and wearing his blue outfit. He finds a way to get back to Celeste. So it's, these 4 books, everybody, they are fascinating children's books, great reads. Certainly, I would read them to, if the child wants to be read to, they're great stories for a parent or a grandparent or, a relation to just sit with the child and read the stories. And of course, yes, we're all big kids at heart.
We are. And, to me, it's very important to read to children, just like it's very important that they listen to music, and they, even like Beethoven or some of the best of musicians, so that they develop culturally or intellectually. And I think stories feed their minds. Now, The Little Blue Lamb, that would too. The First Flower book, I could see it made into a video, a movie for children. It works that way. And, I'd like to see that happen. I'm hoping, it's funny. I don't know if this will result in that many sales. I think sales are the way you determine the success of something, but I think it takes a long time to, build sales.
It does. A lot of people Jane, who work in the industry, both, the acting industry or the creative industry, they'll tell you you've got to knock on an awful lot of doors and do an awful lot of bartering and keep at it and keep at it. Even when you get the knockbacks, the setbacks and the no's, because there's an awful lot of those, if you are going to make it, you've got to have the determination. So this is why authors, you have to keep writing, everybody. Keep writing, because you never know. Just one day, somebody might pick the book up.
Somebody will say yes.
Absolutely. Yeah.
No more no's. It's kind of funny, too, because if you break through with one thing, you can pull the rest with you, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So do you plan to write any more children's books?
I think about this. I'm getting kind of old, and I'm not as well. I have enough energy. I could. There's several things I've left undone. I wrote a story about the Seabiscuit, the horse, the racehorse Seabiscuit. I took it from a book I can't remember the name of the writer. She wrote a book about Seabiscuit for adults, and there were some choice things that I could see would be great in a children's book, like the horse had certain friends. He had another horse, kind of like a old cowboy horse was his friend, but he also had a monkey and a dog. Is that it? And they all slept in the stall with him, and things like that. I think are choice for children, and when he ran, he looked like an egg beater. He was a funny looking horse, and yet he was unstoppable. He won race after race, and this was during the Depression. I think that England suffered a depression similar to the one that we had in the United States after we had the crash in 1929, before I was born. But in that era, in the 1930s, things were very hard for people, and they put a lot on the success of Seabiscuit. So when he ran a very important race at Santa Anita, which is in the LA area race course, people came from LA in cars and on trains and important people. And it was a really big event, and Seabiscuit won, and it was, but so I love the story, but doing the illustrations is very difficult because it would require rendering the Santa Anita racetrack as it looked in the 1930s. And I'm not sure I could do that. But it's not finished. And then I sent a letter to the wonderful lady that wrote it and told her that I had written a story about Seabiscuit, and was she interested? And I never heard back. So
Well, you never know. As I say, you've got to keep going.
I wanted to make, but anyway, so that is unfinished. So there's several things that children's books and other things that are unfinished, but I have a tendency to finish what I start. And that has always been, a good thing for me, you know. So if I invest myself and I start, I usually finish it.
So there you go, everyone. There might be another book out about Seabiscuit, the famous American racehorse.
Yeah.
So I just want to say to Jane, thank you very much for coming on the show. Now, if you want to get the book, you can go on Amazon or you can go on her website. Now, you can get the information off her website by looking at the written introduction that accompanies this interview on Web Talk Radio. You can click her social media sites there, but you can click the web page. Please visit her web page. All her books are there, her paintings, her work, her life is on that website. It's very important. Go and have a look.
John, thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to work with you. I can't tell you. And I love to read stories and told about Celeste.
Oh, I can read a good story. I can read a good story.
So thank you for giving me the opportunity to show my work.
You're very welcome.
Okay.
So I just want to say I'm JT Crowley. Thank you for listening wherever you are in the world. Until next time, stay safe.